Sometimes we have these moments of bravery. And when we capitalize on these moments and take action, they can drastically change the trajectory of our life.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Today I want to talk about moments of bravery. Also, how we get these moments of bravery, just kind of a spark of confidence, and how we can capitalize on them and combine them with doing something on a whim in this moment of bravery. Today, you are going to hear from Mandy Sugrue. She is a Why Not Now listener. She reached out with her story, her Why Not Now story, and it really blew me away, as do many of the stories that we hear from feedback from people writing in on social media, whatever it may be. And you're going to be hearing more from listeners. Today, Mandy is going to share kind of how she took one of these moments of why not, almost just not even taking something super seriously, but just felt like sending an email, and how it led from one thing to the next and completely changed the trajectory of her life. And she did a complete 180, and how something as small as on a whim, leveraging a moment of bravery can shift you from living a life that you're living to living a different life that you want to be choosing instead of a default. A couple of the takeaways that I have from this episode, and as you're listening, try to pay close attention to the things you can pull out, the really tangible things that you could try applying to your life today. One is, as I mentioned, these moments of bravery and on a whim doing something when you have that spark, because sometimes it subsides quickly. So take advantage, capitalize. Also, there's something to be said about what Mandy's been able to do and really create a life that she wants to live. This is her dream life that she went and put the hard work into getting. And there are moments where she almost feels guilty for what she's been able to build and what she is able to do. We tend to try to, I think, sometimes discount or not say out loud things because we're afraid other people are going to feel bad or that it sounds braggy. But you'll hear us talking a little bit about this and owning the experiences that she's been able to generate for herself. So it just struck me that I heard her kind of almost apologize. She wasn't intentionally doing it, but just didn't want to mention some things. And it's like, whoa, we definitely need to think twice about that. And seeing is believing in my mind. So that's another takeaway. It's one thing when we bring on, these really highly successful, high-profile individuals on this show. And oftentimes I hear people say, yeah, well, but I'm not Mark Cuban or I'm not Jessica Alba. And my responses are usually twofold. Number one, they started somewhere. So even though you may not be as able to relate, they still have very valuable stories. But number two, I do see that it's a little easier sometimes to relate and to be able to see what's attainable when you feel a commonality or you just feel
similar to someone and that you could actually see yourself in their shoes. So seeing truly is believing, and I think that's the case with Mandy. Wait until you hear this story. This past week in the Why Not Now private Facebook group, I heard Anna Keel mention and refer to a term that she calls her pivot journey. So instead of being in transition or whatever you like to call it, I really liked that phrase, pivot journey. And you'll see multiple times throughout Mandy's story, she was in a bit of a pivot season or a pivot journey. So shout out to Anna for that phrase. I'm totally going to borrow that. And thanks too for everyone hopping into this private Facebook group. If you aren't in there, this is where we're pulling a lot of the stories and reaching out to listeners to see if you want to share your stories on the show like Mandy. And you can head to whynotnowfacebookgroup.com. It will direct you over to the Facebook group page, and you just request to get in and we'll let you in. And that's where I'm spending a lot of my time. So hop on in there. In fact, I'll be going live this next week in there and answering questions. So I'll see you in there. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. Oftentimes, you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Poopery, the original before-you-go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Poopery have literally taken the smell out of you-know-what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit poopery.com, and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code WHYNOTNOW. That's all one word. And you can hear the story about Poopery in our interview with founder Susie Batiste. That's Why Not Now, episode 28. Poopery is also available at Target. And Mandy, welcome to the Why Not Now show, and thank you so much for reaching out. I am jazzed for you to share your story, and just thank you for listening.
Thank you, Amy Jo. No, I'm really excited about this, and thank you for having the show. It's really contributed quite a bit to my life and to how I think about next steps and sort of forward looking. So thank you for giving that back to the world, and thank you for talking with me.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, your story when you reached out and one of the initial emails, it reads like a movie manuscript almost. So I'm excited for you to share your Why Not Now moment, and it's really plural moments, but starting from the beginning, will you take us back?
Yeah, well, now that you said movie manuscript, I feel like it started with a girl in a dream or something like that.
There you go.
I will try not to recreate or reenact it in that way. But yeah, I guess the funny thing is that my Why Not Now moment that I would say really propelled me to where I am today happened while I was literally crying alone in a park in the middle of the night. And I was living in Burlington, Vermont at the time with a man who I was very much in love with. We'd been together for about 4 years, and this just great community that I really loved. But I was struggling to feel fulfilled professionally, and I had sort of dreamed of being a communications director and working in global health. And specifically, I wanted to work overseas, and I wanted to see the world. And I wanted to work in maternal and child health. And I thought I could do this, and I can save lives, and I can understand the world better. And, I was 23 and I wanted these things, and just couldn't really figure out how to do them from my little corner of the world. And so on a whim, I was in DC visiting family. And while I was there, I just started cold emailing organizations that I wanted to work for, just showing up on their doorstep and saying, can I take you out for a coffee? And I guess I didn't really see any of that turning into anything. It was more just sort of kind of exploring options and what if kind of thing. And then I got a job offer in one of the places that I really dreamed of working. And they wanted me to start in 3 weeks. And so I remember telling my boyfriend, I got back and I told him I got this job. And I remember his response was, okay, so you go visit your parents and then you come back and you tell me we're uprooting our lives and we're leaving in 3 weeks. And I think the reality, I mean, he was correct, the reality of that had kind of hit me of what I had put into motion. I don't think I had allowed myself to understand the consequences of what if one of these jobs came through. So I left the park and I left the house, and I remember running to this park and, very dramatically. And I was sitting at the base of this tree, and I just had this very real moment of sort of seeing these two paths laid before me in a way that I don't think ever struck me. I just thought, I can have it all, I'm going to lean in. And then I saw this one life of living this happy life with this man I loved, and friends who to this day are still like family to me, and in this peaceful life, or this other path of no idea, I don't know what that is, but something is driving me towards it, and I don't even know what it is. I remember the decision process for me at that point, as I was, sitting there, I was thinking, I'll always regret not going. I'll always regret not giving it a try, not traveling a path unknown to me. And if I stay in my comfort zone, I'll resent it. And I think unfairly resent the people who I stayed for when it was my decision to stay. So I left. I did. I packed up my car. I drove down to DC and cried the entire way down. I went from living with my boyfriend and having friends and being this hippy dippy and flowy dresses to moving in with my parents, not knowing a soul, a job that's just scared the hell out of me, and being thrown into sort of this very DC Blackberry culture and going through a breakup. And that year I was, my grandmother died, and we spent many days and evenings in the hospital between my job and my parents' job. And then my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I just remember the whole time that year thinking, this was a huge mistake. This is terrible. And, just dreaming of being back with this man who I loved and going to see his shows and kayaking to work and blueberry picking, as opposed to whatever I am in right now, jumping into a new job, you're working around the clock and nothing's good enough. And, you're trying to prove yourself. But I look back now and I couldn't really imagine not having the life that I have now. That's been extremely challenging every step of the way. And over the past 7-8 years, I've had several points of just dreaming of being back in my town in Vermont and, curling up and kind of escaping the present. But that was really sort of this why not now moment. So yeah, I guess that was sort of the big first one that I would say propelled me to where I am now.
Absolutely. And I do want to get to where you are now, because that's just like the first 20 minutes of the movie, really, maybe 30. And a few things that you said, Mandy, really struck me as I'm hearing your story and listening to you. You said on a whim, you just started cold emailing these VPs and asking for an informational interview or just coffee, really. And the on a whim is something that I hear often as being a catalyst for these why not now moments and huge transformation, really. It's like we kind of just throw something out there and don't really think it's going to stick, but just kind of throw it out there because it's like, on a whim. And that's a common thread. So for everyone listening, I think it's important to be cognizant of that or on a whim is a powerful thing. And the worst thing that could have happened was you got the job and you turned it down, or you got the job and you went. When you think of it like that, good for you. And I'm sure everybody wants to know what was in these emails that you were sending to get these VPs in person. So maybe that's a whole nother episode and you can dive into that, but you must have an amazing
I think they just probably took pity on me. They were like, this sad little 24-year-old is like, can I come take you out for coffee? Like, no experience. They were probably just like, this girl's got a chutzpah, because I was like, I found your email on the website and I'd love to take you out for coffee and pick your brain about, what kind of things you'd look for. And I think I look back now and I'm like, oh my God, I probably wouldn't have responded to that email. But when you get that type of message, you just think, wow, this person isn't, this person's interested in what I do and what I'm doing. And so, sure, okay. I wasn't looking for a job. There was no open positions at these organizations. I was just sort of like, I just want to pick your brain. This is what I want to do. And And those are I look back now and I'm probably very embarrassed about those messages. But
No. Well, they converted. I mean, so what not everyone probably knows yet that they will soon learn is now you've lived all over the globe and you have this dream life that you've been able to build for yourself, and without taking that step, you may not have netted out in these specific places, right? You might still be back in that other path. And so let's go back to your why not now moment as you're sitting in this park crying, having this huge just probably pressure of, okay, what am I going to do? Can you talk through a little bit more of what was going through your mind? Did you make the decision right then and there for sure, 100%, or did you just think you knew?
No.
Because you ended up, headed down to your new job and doing almost a 180.
I would say it was like a very slow, drawn out, sad process over 3 weeks. I think I knew deep down that I was going to go, but I wasn't admitting it just yet. So I had told them I would get back to them, I think. And, when you're young and somebody offers you a job, you're like, I'll get back to you tomorrow. I don't want you to wait. I have no bargaining power here. So I think I told them I'd get back to them in about 2 days or something like that. But that evening, that night, I think I knew that I had to go. But I still, again, what I mean by the slow, drawn out piece is not really letting it sink in and admitting to yourself what you're walking away from in order to get in the car, in order. So, right, you're like, okay, I'm going to tell them that I'm going to take it. But I went back to the apartment and with my boyfriend at the time, and we went to sleep and just kept go the next day, just kind of talked it out a bit and thought he was like, well, maybe we could try long distance. And I was like, that would be great. So we were talking as if I was going already. So I think the understanding, we kind of almost knew that I would do this. And then we kind of did what we needed to do to, I think, allow me to move into that. So sometimes when I hear your interviews, I'm like, God, that person was so decisive. That sounds amazing. But that person's like,
the truth is
I just knew and I didn't.
No, it's the truth is often it's a phase, it's a gradual. There's a moment and then there's a phase, of course, after. So then, and that's what's interesting too, is that it's not like you said yes to this job and everything became amazing and this was easy street. It was a messy period, so to speak, and it was a challenging period, incremental of just these transitions. You had more challenges with family health and things like that. If we can fast forward a little bit, because this is where it's just amazing to see how things have unfolded since that big decision. Will you share what happened next and kind of where you are now? And I know that that's a good span of time, but I think it's pretty important because one thing truly did lead to another, and that was a pretty epic decision.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I finally kind of found my footing in DC, but I ended up leaving that organization and getting a job at another about 2 years in. And the next job that I had was, working in international health, and it was this amazing opportunity. And pretty much the next week I was on a plane to South Africa and I was traveling around with this job, and I loved it. But I all of a sudden just kind of felt myself working up this DC ladder, and it just sort of, that's not why I got into this. That's not why I decided down this road. I wasn't looking to climb any sort of specific ladder, although maybe that's sort of part and parcel of being in organizational work. But I quit. I decided I wanted to live in Paris, and I knew I always wanted to live in Europe. And so I had applied to a small grad school program in Paris, and just one of those things, that's why it's interesting that you called it out. On a whim, I applied to this. The only program I've ever applied to. I had no plans to go back to school, but I thought, it's in Paris, and, wouldn't that be interesting? And I got into the program, and so it was, again, sort of that, why not now? But I remember a lot of people were sort of like, but you're already working in international health. You're literally doing all the things that you said you wanted to do when you left Vermont. Mm-hmm. And now you're quitting that and you're moving to Paris to go back to school for a degree you do not need. And again, I just had that moment. I got the letter from the school saying get yourself in. And I sent it to my sisters and my family, and people sort of like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know, it's kind of crazy. And then I just said, I'm doing it. But again, I wish I could have, it was very similar in that it was almost like I knew I was going to go, but that sort of drawn out process kind of happened of being like, will I, won't I? And then I just put in my resignation, and I gave them whatever time and quit my job. And I had this giant suitcase that was like the size of an apartment. And I was like, I'm moving to Europe and I'm bringing everything I've ever owned with me. And somehow it ended up just kind of working out. The job that I was working as offered to keep me on as a consultant. So while I was going to grad school, I was going to classes in the morning and then working as a consultant in the afternoon on DC time, and then living in Paris and, spending my weekends with these people that I'd met in Paris and going to the south of France and all the things that I kind of wanted to do. And it was just sort of this kind of crazy, weird thing. And I didn't really feel like I was progressing professionally. It wasn't that, but it just felt like opening doors in terms of this type of life that I wanted to sort of see the world and be able to support myself doing it in sort of this strange way. Yeah, so I was doing that. And then about 2 years later, I was finishing up my degree and thinking, well, what do I want to do next? I'm not sure if I'm ready to leave Paris. And the organization I was still consulting with at the time, it was right during the Ebola outbreak, right when it had been exploding in West Africa. And my job asked if I would move to Switzerland to go work with the World Health Organization in their communications team, which I to this day, they would never have asked me to do that if I wasn't already living in Paris. They wouldn't have sent me from DC to go do this. And so I just grabbed a bag and I moved, and I was supposed to only be there for 3 months. And that just kind of got extended. And then I eventually got recruited for the job I have now, which is a communications director working at the International AIDS Society. So, I'm working on HIV research and capacity building, and I'm living in Switzerland, and I get to do this work that I really love doing and feels very impactful to me. And then on the weekends, I'm, snowboarding in the Swiss Alps, which feels surreal and weird and kind of bougie when I say it out loud, but
that's okay. Own it. I have FOMO.
It's like, it's like one of those things where I'll hear myself saying it. I'll be talking to friends at home and I'm like, oh, I can't, I'm going to Chamonix this weekend for snowboarding. And everyone's like, I hope you hear yourself. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. It does. That's just my life. But, I would never have anticipated this if I look back at, that 24-year-old girl like crying in Vermont and to feel like I kind of navigated this, but not with any real plan. It's just kind of going with your gut at that time and sort of saying, this doesn't feel right, so what does? And it's actually interesting. I had a conversation with a friend of mine from Vermont. I was visiting about a year ago, and she said, I never really understood why you left. It seemed so strange that you walked away from love. You had this great man and you guys really had something and you just left for a job. She said, but now I get it. It wasn't a job. It was sort of your individual dreams that was outside of anybody else, but just for yourself. And it was interesting to hear her say that, because it was the first time somebody from that life that I had in Vermont sort of kind of said out loud, like, we didn't understand your choice. We thought it was weird. We weren't like, you go, girl. We were like, that's weird. You're just leaving. And didn't feel like I had a ton of support there. So, yeah.
Well, and that's actually, I wanted to double down on this point for a second, because as you were sharing that the first time, and I'm glad you circled back, it totally resonated with me, because not only do I hear this often, but I feel it too, in terms of our friends and family tend to encourage us to lead the lives that they think we want, right? And maybe even lead the lives that they want, or stay in our zone of kind of excellence or comfort. And I think sometimes we have to almost be selective on what we share with who when until our decisions are made because of that reason. Because
absolutely.
Sometimes we can be more vulnerable or just more impressionable than we think. And I've started to do that more with my ideas, with my just different big life changes. Is usually it's me and my husband discussing it, and maybe a couple of close friends or family members, and then you can let people know when you've decided, because otherwise that feedback loop sometimes just isn't isn't helpful, and it's noise, and it can become confusing.
I completely agree. I think I used to think, particularly when I was younger, that I'm an extrovert and I need to just be around people and talk to people all the time and get that feedback loop. And anytime anything happens, I need to talk to my friends immediately. And I've actually learned through this process, just as you do, getting to know yourself and as you get older, but particularly when you're constantly moving to a different place where you don't know people, you quickly have to get to know yourself because you're all you have, And I started to actually, I'm much more introverted. I get my energy by being alone, and the ideas and what I want to do and how I want to get there and sort of what the future looks like have come from long walks by myself, and not talking about with people and not bouncing those ideas off right away, but sort of sitting with it. And so those whim moments that you rightfully pointed out have come from usually me sitting at a cafe with my computer and being like, well, maybe I'll just email this person and see what happens, and then if I hear something back, then maybe I'll mention it to a friend or a sister. But that comes from really just sort of sitting with it. I mean, within this time that I've done this, I've been on this sort of journey. I hiked Kilimanjaro, and that was not, again, that was a whim. That was something I always sort of wanted to do. And I'm kind of sitting by myself and thinking, what do I physically, outside of profession, what sort of feels inspirational to me right now on just sort of an active level? And that just kind of came from that just sitting by myself. I wasn't talking about it. I wasn't making plans. I wasn't hashing it out. I just was sort of like, let's just book the ticket and see what happens. And it never would have happened if I had talked it out. I'm sure people would be like, I've been talking about it, I think, for years, and most people were like, you really have to train for that, and you really have to do that, and it kind of talked me out of it.
Oh, I love these themes that are coming up just listening to you. And it's like, send the email, book the ticket.
Yeah.
Go out on that whim, and it might feel like a whim, but actually that's your internal GPS probably guiding you.
Time out. I just said out on a whim. That's not a thing. That phrase really, it isn't a thing. I guess it is now. I just said it. But I believe it's out on a limb or on a whim. My ego would like you to know I know there is a difference. And also, if you want to borrow this little new phrase, feel free to, but you might get some weird looks. So, all right, back to the program.
Also, I heard you say a couple times, I knew I was going to go, but I think it sounds like there was a lapse or like a delta between knowing truly in your gut and then actions and words carrying that out outwardly.
Yeah.
It's like the inside
it's almost I had to convince myself that I wasn't going to do it. It's almost like I put in the back of my head, like, well, this isn't really going to turn into anything. I don't have to make that choice now. I'm just going to, I'm putting a few things out there and we'll see what happens. Mm-hmm. And it's almost with that, it's like this safety net, but I'm doing it at the same time. But it sort of allows me to put it out there without feeling like I'm doing it. I don't know what that is.
Exactly. And even when you made the decision, whether it was to leave Vermont or to actually leave and go to school in Paris, you had that knowing, and then sometimes it does take a little while for that reconciliation of what's going on the inside to catch up with what's going on the outside, right? To actually start taking those steps. And so that's a huge takeaway too. And, you've gone from sitting under a tree, just probably feeling like the sky was falling with this decision and heartbroken, or knowing that you could be soon, all the way to building this life, surfing on the coast of Portugal. And it sounds like, wow, that I can't do that. Some people might be listening thinking, there's no way I could do that. And I guess I just challenge anyone that's having that go through their mind to ask themselves, why not? Why not? Look at the path that you've just described. It wasn't from point A to point Z, but you've been able to navigate, and of course it's not over. This isn't just a romantic fairy tale story that one person can have. You've created this for yourself, and you've built this life. So do not feel guilty about snowboarding in the Alps when you say that out loud. Because it's not like this has been handed to you in some privileged way. So, yeah, I just am so grateful to have you share, and you're so relatable and truly a voice of authority when it comes to taking action on ideas, even if they're on a whim.
Yeah, thank you, Amy Jo. I appreciate that. It's definitely, I think if anybody was listening to this story, it's not like there was some grand plan. And I think my biggest takeaway when I look at this, you just put a little inertia behind something and then see where it takes you. And I think that's what it came down to. I just sent a few emails out and I didn't think, just apply to that program. What's literally the harm? You've always wanted to live in Paris. This program's in Paris. And I could have gone there and not had a consulting gig. And it's sort of, what are you willing to risk? But you don't have to make that decision when you're kind of start putting the inertia behind something. And I have these conversations actually quite a bit with several of my friends who always think, oh, I want to travel more. You get to travel all the time. And I think you could if you wanted to. But I do think that, I have a lot of friends who say they want to, but, they're investing in a house and they're investing in other areas of their life that I'm certainly not. I own nothing to my name, but, that I have put the inertia behind traveling, seeing the world, going somewhere that I don't know anybody. And that's where I sort of invested my inertia, my initial sort of, let's lean into that and just see where it goes. So I think if somebody is looking to do that go in that direction, it's really just sort of putting your toe in the water, emailing that person, booking that ticket, and just thinking, I don't have to make that decision now. I'm just testing out the waters. And then you can kind of see how it unrolls. And whatever role that way that is, it's, is it buying a house? Is it finding a new job? Is it starting your own business? Is it taking a trip? And I think that's the kind of the big lesson that I've learned. And those whim moments of saying, just give it a try. Your head's there. What's the worst thing that happens? And then let the chips fall where they may.
Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us. Also, after recording more than 100 episodes, I've created a bit of a cheat sheet on the top 5 things I've learned from renegades and how they get from idea to action, from dreaming to doing. I will email you the downloadable PDF when you subscribe to my newsletter. Just head to amyjomartin.com and click on Connect with Me. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Greer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?